My name's Andrew, and this is my 1972 Honda Chally. I've had small bikes for probably, I don't know, near on 10 years. Picked one up in high school, a Yamaha 2-stroke, which I still have, just to ride to school because my car kept breaking down. And ever since then, kind of got an obsession with the 50cc bikes, modifying them, making them your own, trying to make them faster. Eventually worked my way into the Hondas. Now I've got this little Honda Chally, 4-stroke. Not as fun as a 2-stroke, but a lot easier to ride and easier to maintain. I first sort of learnt about Honda Challys when my mate Callum from Small Bike Stuff picked up one from Trade Me probably 6 years ago, maybe more, a little pink beast. And I thought they were a bit funny looking, a bit weird, but when he eventually got it running, he let us all have a ride on it, and ever since then I've kind of wanted one, but I didn't really tell anyone. And then this one came up for sale as a bunch of parts, and I actually managed to score it as a bare frame, and I've built it and assembled it from there, and now I think it looks pretty cool. So the Honda Chally's been around since the early 70s. It was produced at the same time as the Honda Dax. The Honda Chally was sort of marketed towards women because it has a low slung frame, easy to climb over. This one is a little bit different in stock. It's got the longer swing arm, lower bars and seat, and the front disc brake is also included. The rear end is sourced from a Chinese pit bike, a 125cc little kid's dirt bike. It's had some mounts added for the hardtail. Usually they're a monoshock in the rear, but the Chally is not set up for that. It's got a disc brake included, it works really well, and usually they have a big dirt tyre, but I've actually put a road scooter tyre on it. It's 12-inch. The front end is the stock front end with the disc brake added. You can get these from a lot of places. This one's just a generic Chinese disc brake, bolts straight to the hub, and I've removed the springs from the suspension, so there's no travel up here, and it looks a lot cooler. So essentially the bike is hard suspension, solid suspension all round. Got big fat tyres though, so it's actually pretty comfortable. So this version of the Chally as it sits is probably the latest one in about 4 or 5 different iterations of it. It started out as a rusty yellow frame, and that got sandblasted and painted a gunmetal grey, and that was similar to this with its solid suspension but no disc brake. And I rode that around for a little while and it was pretty good, and then I started riding it off-road on the gravel, and the lack of suspension was pretty punishing, so I put in some rear shocks and some extended monkey front springs and used it as a sort of a dirt bike, gravel bike. Took it on a few different adventures around the place. Once I was done with that, that frame got taken out and it's currently awaiting a further project, and then the blue frame came along with this bunch of parts and got put back to the low slung solid suspension, but now with the added disc brake and the different handlebars and exhaust. So this one is running a Lifan engine, and they're fine, but they're nothing exciting. So I wanted to give it a little bit more of difference. So it's actually got a Kitako race flywheel and a inner rotor kit. It's a genuine Japanese one made for a Honda Monkey, I think, a Z50 engine, but it happened to fit onto this Chinese motor. So that means that it revs really quickly, but it does lose a bit of top end power, so hills aren't this bike's friend. And because of that, it doesn't have a lighting coil or charging coil. So the bike's actually just got a total loss system. So that means there's a small battery in the back, and it's got LED lights throughout. There's better ways to do it, but it's how I've done it, and it works fine as long as you remember to charge the battery after every ride. A few other small things. As I said, this bike came to me in a box of parts. It wasn't complete. It was missing a lot of the original pieces. So it has a few additions, like the side cover for the original airbox is now a sink drain plug, just from the hardware store. Fits on there perfectly and looks kind of funny. The headlight is a fog light from a car. These are around in the 70s, but they still make them today. Cover pulls off and it's got a little LED light in there. Handbrake in the rear, that's from a kid's quad bike, and it's actually got a locking lever, which is pretty handy because it doesn't have a stand. It's so low to the ground that the stand kept catching on the road. So now you can lean it up against the wall and just lock the handbrake and it's fine. The choke, obviously this carb is quite a bit bigger than factory, so it doesn't fit under the cover. What I've had to do is chop away the plastic, and the original choke mechanism from this Chinese carb was sticking out the side. To resolve that, I cut it off and welded half a spanner on there, and that's how I moved the choke now. The mufflers for the exhaust system, I found these two mufflers lying on the ground at a swap meet. I think they were off a pit bike or a pocket bike, but I've chopped them up and pretended I know how to weld and made them fit onto this bike. They keep falling off. The bash plate and the oil cooler are just generic pit bike items. The bash plate is definitely needed because this bike is quite low to the ground. And the oil cooler, I don't know if it actually does anything, but it looks cool. And it is hooked up, so there's definitely oil in it. The seat, I didn't have a seat, and I didn't like how big the seats were. They have quite a large hinge and they fold. So I just got my mate to cut up a bit of wood, and he did a fancy design on it. And it's actually pretty comfortable, but it's literally just a piece of plywood. I use this bike all the time. I ride it to work, it's reliable. I'll take it on big group rides on the weekend. I ride it anywhere, even though it is slightly uncomfortable with no suspension. It's not built to be a show bike. This one is original paint. I might paint it in the future, but I do like having a bike you can just throw around. It doesn't matter if it gets scratched. It's still rusty, but it's solid. It's safe. I don't feel like it's going to fall apart on me. It's got plenty of Loctite on the bolts. But yeah, it's definitely no show bike. I use it all the time.
There they are. Now Andrew's doing a number on himself. Oh. His exhaust is broken. That might be the early end of our ride.